Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're here to talk about Ukraine, obviously, and this emergency that we all are facing, hopefully together. Let me start by saying strength is not a provocation. This administration has been a step behind every step of the way, if you will, never quite doing things soon enough. The Ukrainians need airplanes, and they need equipment to fight with of all kinds, much of it located throughout the Eastern Bloc countries of NATO. They need this assistance, and they need it right now.
Thank you, Leader McConnell. And I want to thank all the members that have come together in support of Ukraine. And first, I want to commend the Ukrainian people who are fighting. They're fighting to withstand a brutal regime and an assault from President Putin and Russia right now. We stand with you. We are working to get you the weapons, the air power, and the equipment necessary for you to defend yourself. But, folks, we are not moving nearly fast enough. We must move faster. If we don't, we will see additional lives lost every minute and every hour that this conflict goes on. A little bit of history. Now, after Ukraine declared its independence from the Soviet Union, it still held the world's third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons. Ukraine was fragile, it was unstable, and it was a fledgling democracy. So America stepped up at that time, and we made an agreement with Ukraine. That agreement was that in exchange for protection by America, Ukraine would surrender its nuclear arsenal. That agreement still stands today. But without more action by the U.S., Putin is turning a signed agreement into nothing more than a piece of paper. So this administration has already sent some lethal aid. We've sent missiles, stingers, etc. And these stingers have been effective. We have seen that. The Russian Air Force is struggling. But Ukraine needs more. And this last weekend, we were on a call with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and he told me and all of my colleagues that he needs fighter jets. He needs to be able to defend his own airspace. And that's why we are here today. We are urging the administration to act immediately to arm Ukraine and to support our NATO allies. The Pentagon press secretary said last week that success for the U.S. in this mission in Ukraine is a free and independent, sovereign Ukraine. And if that's true, Mr. President, then send the fighter jets. Help Poland deliver their MiGs and help us backfill our NATO partners. The administration claims the reason they blocked this transfer is a concern about escalation. Really? Vladimir Putin is aware that American-provided stingers are killing Russians today, and our president knows that too. America should be doing everything we can, short of boots on the ground or in the air, to protect Ukraine. Our message today to the president: send the MiGs. Arm our Ukrainian friends right now. Next, we will hear from Senator Romney.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. I agree with what she said. I won't add a lot to it except this. One, I want to underscore the feelings in my heart and the feelings of every person I know in this great country of affection and concern and hope for the people of Ukraine, and admiration of President Zelensky in his effort to lead the world. He has asked us for aircraft, specifically MiGs. We need to get him those MiGs. It's a bipartisan message. It's not just us. We had a hearing this morning with the Foreign Relations Committee. The chairman, Chairman Menendez, said the same thing. Senator Shaheen said the same thing. Democrats are saying the same thing. Send these MiGs. And the question is, well, why aren't they being sent? Because we've heard now for days that this is something that's being discussed. Enough talk. People are dying. Send them the planes that they need. They say they need MiGs. People say, well, maybe that's not the ideal weapon for them. That's what they say they want. They're there. They have the eyes to determine what they want. They want MiGs. Get them the MiGs. As Joni just indicated, some say, well, this might be provocative. My goodness, Russia has invaded a land in an unprovoked place. This is extraordinary that we're worried about that. By the way, we're not going to stop the killing in Ukraine until we, in NATO, fear Putin less than he fears us. It's time for him to fear what we might do. Because, frankly, his military is bogged down in Ukraine. And if NATO were to get activated in some way by his provocation, why, obviously, he'd be in a very, very weak position. So please, let us get them the MiGs that they need. Let's do it as fast as possible. And if the administration has a reason that they're not doing it, please tell us what it is. We've had hearing after hearing, both at a classified and non-classified setting, asking why they haven't gotten the MiGs out. And they say, well, this is something we're talking about. We're working with people on this. Enough talk. Tell us what the problem is. And let's get the job done so that we can save lives in Ukraine and defend the cause of freedom. Thank you.
Okay. We'll have Senator Graham and then Senator Kramer.
Well, thank you, Joni and Mitt, for doing the letter. And to my Democratic colleagues, thank you for speaking out on behalf of the Ukrainian defense needs. So I'm not a member of the press, but if I were, I'd have a lot of questions. This is what was said on March 6th, 2022 on Face the Nation. Blinken was the guest. If, for instance, the Polish government, a NATO member, wants to send fighter jets, does that get a green light from the U.S., or are you afraid that that will escalate tensions? Secretary Blinken. No, that gets a green light. In fact, we're talking with our Polish friends right now about what we might be able to do to backfill their needs if, in fact, they choose to provide these fighter jets to the Ukrainians. That was March 6th. What the hell happened? Did the Defense Department know that we were going to give Poland the green light? Did they say then that would be an escalation? What's the difference between Poland giving them the jets and us giving them the jets? Here's what I think happened. I think the Russians threatened the Poles, and the Poles were looking for America to have our back, and we folded like a cheap suit. So this briefing today was beyond offensive. The theory of the case is we can't give them a squadron of MiG-29s because they may use them to invade Russia. That's what she said. To our military, who is now saying this is an escalation, did you say that when the suggestion was that Poland give the MiGs? This makes no sense. The only reason I think there's been a change in policy is we let Putin back us down. We've picked Putin's threats over the Ukrainians' needs. We're all on that teleconference, right? He said, if you will not do a no-fly zone, which I don't support at this point, give us the jets. What's the fear of the jets? They actually may be flown by brave Ukrainian fighter pilots to blow up a bunch of Russian stuff. I think the administration is afraid of the Russians losing because they haven't contemplated that. So I just want to let people know that on March the 6th, the United States policy was green-lighting MiGs to the Ukraine if Poland did it. Now that Poland's asked us to be part of the transfer system, we all of a sudden say no. And here's what breaks my heart. This is dishonorable. It's one thing to be incompetent. It's another thing to be dishonorable. Putin's got to be happy today knowing he backed us down. And the Ukrainians got to have a heavy heart knowing that the one thing they need that's available to them that we're not giving was taken off the table. Good day for Putin, bad day for the Ukraine, and a dishonorable day for America.
Thank you. It's always great to follow Lindsey Graham at one of these. All I would say is I agree with everything that's been said to this point, but also express my grief and my concern. You guys, one of the things that's, that's important in addition to strength and message is that there's a consistency coming from the leadership. And I think the leader said it very well right up front. At every step, our president's been a step behind. Now, even when he's done the right thing, he's generally done it late. I mean, for crying out loud, Germany shut down Nord Stream 2 before he sanctioned it. Justin Trudeau, for Pete's sake, put a sanction on oil before the United States did. Justin Trudeau. We're bigger than that. We're stronger than that. We should be more decisive and bold than that. Consistency of message matters. But there is a history of this. Going back to 2014 in the Obama-Biden administration, non-lethal aid, blankets. 2018, Donald Trump, lethal aid. 2021, the National Security Council said no lethal aid. It's not much of a deterrent when the assistance that you're providing comes after the invasion. It is time to get out in front of it. 2 weeks ago, I would have said Vladimir Putin's the single greatest uniter in the world. Today, I would say President Zelensky is the single greatest uniter in the world, and we need to have his back. Senator Collins.
Good afternoon. This morning, the Senate Intelligence Committee held its annual hearing on worldwide threats. And needless to say, much of the discussion focused on the war in Ukraine. I had an exchange with our nation's top defense intelligence officer. I asked him about control of the skies over Ukraine. And remember, what we're talking about here is allowing the Ukrainians to control the skies over their own country and providing them with the MiGs and also with armed unmanned drones that would allow them to do so. I asked him whether that would be helpful to the Ukrainians. He said that it would be. I think there actually is much more agreement on the need to let the MiGs go forward and to provide armed drones than may appear. I have talked to numerous of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and they too agree with providing the aircraft to the Ukrainians. Finally, I don't know how anyone could have read the headlines in today's papers about the Russians bombing a maternity hospital and be opposed to providing them with these essential aircraft. Thank you.
Senator Wicker.
Hello, Roger Wicker from Mississippi. Here's what we know. A group of bipartisan House and Senate members had a Zoom call with President Zelensky last weekend. The question was asked, what is the first thing you need? What do you need most? And President Zelensky said, we need aircraft. We know that that aircraft is available, and all of us are up here today joining, I think, a bipartisan group saying that we indeed need to facilitate that in any way we can. Here's also what we know. We know that when this war began 14 days ago, in the run-up to it, most of the intelligence, most of the experts in and out of the government were saying that the Ukrainians would be overrun in a matter of 2, 3, 4 days. The president of a country named Zelensky, who has led his country to thwart the Russian advance for 2 weeks, knows what he's doing. And when he says they need the aircraft, and we have at our disposal the aircraft to give him, we ought to rely on that person who so far has been phenomenally successful. But something's going on here which I don't understand. I will be followed by Senator Portman, who, along with Senator Shaheen, wrote a very fine letter this past weekend urging the delivery of the MiGs and urging the United States government under the leadership of the President and the Secretary of State to do what, in fact, the Secretary of State had said he would support. I felt we could get a number of Democrats to sign that letter last weekend. Somehow, today, Senator Ernst has a letter that's almost word for word what was signed by Senator Shaheen and Senator Portman last weekend, and for some reason, our Democratic friends are telling us that although many of them support us, they don't want to sign this letter. In my view, maybe the administration is about to come forward and reverse themselves and say, yes, the MiGs can be delivered. I hope that's correct. I hope there's some secret, puzzling plan to do this. In my view, a bipartisan letter of vast majority of Republicans and Democrats in the Senate would give the administration cover and would provide support from another branch of the government to do this. But I would simply say this is a crucial weekend. Kyiv may be surrounded, and Senator Collins is absolutely right. Air cover is essential in any conflict, and it is essential in this war. And I would rely on the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, who has withstood against all expectations. If he says they need them, I think he knows what he's talking about because he's there on the ground. We have it within our power to facilitate this, and we need to do it today without delay.
Senator Portman.
Well, my colleagues have said it well. Let me just back up for a second and remind us where we are. We have a sovereign, independent country that happens to be a democracy and a strong ally of ours that has been invaded by an authoritarian regime, broken every international rule, unauthorized, unjustified, and now barbaric, going after hospitals and schools. Even the Holocaust Memorial in Kyiv was damaged. So the United States has expressed their concern about being provocative. The rest of the world has been provoked. I mean, the free world, even some countries you might not expect, have stepped forward and said, this is totally unacceptable. And my fear is that if we worry about provoking Russia in the face of what they have done, they'll just continue to do it and probably not end with Ukraine after they have decapitated the government, destroyed the country, and killed thousands of innocent civilians. So that's the context that I look at this in. This is urgent. It's not a matter of weeks. It's a matter of days for us to continue to provide them the help they need to defend themselves. I will say something else, which is President Zelensky has been open, as have others in the Ukrainian government, calling for a no-fly zone. Many Americans have also called for that, by the way. This is an alternative to the no-fly zone that the administration is definitely not going to support, nor do most of my colleagues probably at this point, because it involves us too directly. I get that. But if you're not going to do a no-fly zone to protect these women and children who are trying to flee from these cities along these safe zones that Russia is shelling, then at least provide them the weapons they need to protect themselves. Anticipating your questions, I will respond to two things quickly that we're hearing from the Department of Defense and others. By the way, Tony Blinken said green light. Do you remember that? Seems like it was a year ago. That was like 24 hours ago. March 6th. And now it's untenable. But one thing they're saying is that these weapons aren't as badly needed as other weapons. So we're not going to send planes because they don't know what they need. We know better what they need. And what they need are very sophisticated anti-aircraft batteries. And this would be more effective at killing Russians, knocking their planes out of the sky. Well, that's interesting because the second argument is that this would be too provocative for Russia. If the planes are provocative, wouldn't the thing that the Pentagon says would be more efficacious, more effective, be more provocative? So the argument doesn't seem to hold water. I don't understand the logic. When you hear that, I hope you will ask them those questions. Finally, I will say, Nord Stream 2, the SWIFT sanctions, the Stinger missiles, the banning of oil, what do all those things have in common? In each of those cases, the administration said no. In each case, they said no. And in each case, members of Congress, Republican and Democrat alike, took to this podium and the floor of the Senate and other places and talked to you in the media. And in each case, the administration did a 180. And they now support those things. So I'm not losing hope. I think this makes sense. I think this is the right thing to do. Only this? No, other things as well. If they can get more armed drones, that would be fantastic. We don't have the ability, I'm told, to do that, but other countries do. And we can help facilitate that as well. There are other countries that have other Soviet-era aircraft that could be helpful, like Bulgaria and Slovakia, including MiG-29s. So I think this is part of a package that they desperately want. They know what their needs are better than anyone. They're the ones being killed. And I think we need to respond.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take questions. Yes, thank you.
This morning, the Director of National Intelligence said at the hearing that Senator Collins referenced that they have intelligence assessments to back up their belief that the transfer of these planes would be escalatory or provocative in their words. Have you seen those intelligence assessments, and if so, what do you make of them?
I have not seen those intelligence estimates, so I do know that the intelligence community also said that Ukraine would be gone in 3 to 5 days when Russia went into Ukraine. That hasn't happened. We have very differing ideas on what could happen, should happen, but as Senator Portman pointed out, escalatory. I think if Joe Biden looked sideways at President Putin would take it as being escalatory. So I think we need to stand up, step up, and provide the Ukrainians what they need, and they need this.
Yeah, I just note, let me just say, note as well that President Putin has actually said that things we're doing are provocative. He's already said that the sanctions we put in place are like declaring war. He's going to continue saying that, and we're fearful of provoking him. It's time for him to be fearful of us instead of the other way around. And we have to do everything in our power to provide the capability of the Ukrainian people to defend themselves. And that is something which we must do. The president must take this action because lives are at stake.
Yes, ma'am.
Have either of you been in direct contact or received an explanation from senior Pentagon officials about why they're not providing the MiGs?
I have not. I have not. We just know what has been stated previously by the administration, but somehow in the last day or so, their opinion has changed.
You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out. On March 6th, 4 days ago, it was the policy of the United States to give a green light to transfer the MiGs from Poland to the Ukraine. Apparently, there was no intelligence assessment at that time to deny the green light. No one apparently at the Pentagon spoke up and say this would be an escalation, or if they did, they were ignored. So what's happened from March the 6th to today? The Russians have backed the administration down. When the Poles wanted our help in the transfer to have their back and did something pretty clever, well, why don't you help us transfer? All of a sudden, this went to World War III. All of a sudden, these jets that were going to be given by the Poles to defend Ukraine were now the tool for the Ukrainians to invade Russia. A squadron of MiG-29s. This stinks. This is dishonorable, and we need to change course. And Tom Cotton's here.
Yes. So we have been joined by a couple additional members. I would like them to speak to you as well, and then we'll resume with questions.
Yeah, and I'll address that question. This decision is not based on any intelligence. This is a policy decision, and it's one more of the timid, hesitating half measures this administration has taken. You may have seen this morning in the annual open hearing of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I pressed Director Avril Haines on this, There is no intelligence that suggests these aircraft, somehow uniquely, these aircraft are going to be escalatory in Vladimir Putin's eyes. It was the exact same intelligence that caused the administration not to send Stinger missiles for all of last year, to slow down the delivery of anti-tank missiles. There is no intelligence to support this. It's only the policy decision of the president. And it is a ridiculous decision, and it makes the United States look ridiculous. On Sunday, we give the green light to Poland to provide those planes. 2 days later, it would be escalatory if we did it after Poland gave it to us. We're providing them Stinger missiles to shoot Russian pilots out of the sky. We can't provide them tactical aircraft. You know who I bet doesn't draw a distinction between those two things? The Russian pilots who are being shot out of the sky by Stinger missiles or by tactical aircraft. This is just yet another instance in which Joe Biden has allowed Vladimir Putin to back him down by saying boo. He reminds me of the generals of the Army of Potomac when U.S. Grant took it over in 1864, had been beaten down by Robert E. Lee for 3 years. And Grant told them, I'm sick and tired of hearing about what Lee is going to do to us. You think he's going to do a somersault and land on our both our flanks and our rear at the same time? You should go back to your commands and decide what we are going to do to Lee. That's what Joe Biden needs to do. He needs to decide what the United States and NATO are going to do to put Vladimir Putin on the back foot. Because if we continue to blink every time Vladimir Putin says boo, it's not going to stop in Ukraine, it's not going to stop in Europe. We might as well call the commanding general at Fort Lewis outside Seattle and tell him to go take down the flag and surrender our position, because we will never stand up to Russia if every time Vladimir Putin says boo, we back down.
Thank you. James.
That's a pretty clear statement, Tom. So, end of the day, we need to stand with the Ukrainians. We either stand with the Ukrainians or we don't stand with the Ukrainians. This has been about blankets and medical equipment, and then it becomes anti-tank equipment, and then it is now Stinger missiles that are shooting Russian helicopter pilots in the face. They're asking for the next level in this, and it's not something new in the battle space. They have aircraft they're dealing with now, but they just have a very small number. We lose track of the fact that Ukraine is the size of Texas. And so this perception that somehow if 20 additional aircraft come in, that's going to be this enormous different game changer on them. They're covering a battle space the size of Texas. They need the opportunity to be able to defend as many different areas as they can. They need the opportunity to be able to have the Russians on the ground be concerned about Ukrainian aircraft coming into that area, taking out their ground forces, as the Ukrainian ground forces are now experiencing from Russian aircraft. That equalizes the battlefield. They're not asking for anything that's irrational or unreasonable. The Ukrainians are asking for simply the ability to be able to fight their own war in their own country from an aggressor. We either believe that Russia is the aggressor and the Ukrainians have the right to be able to defend themselves or not. We did not consider it escalatory when the Russians were sending in equipment in to be able to fight against us when they were providing that to the Taliban to attack us in Afghanistan. So for Putin to then make some threat to say this is escalatory, he's made that same threat for every single thing that we've done through this entire process. Putin should not want to face us, does not want to face us. We don't want a war with him, but we also need his people out of Ukraine, out of a free country, and we should stand alongside of those folks to be able to help them. In 2017, the Oklahoma National Guard spent an entire year training the Ukrainian military. They trained them on how to shoot, they trained them on how to organize, they trained them how to do battlefield communication, they trained them in medical care. They were walking alongside of them. Americans have been walking alongside the Ukrainians for years now to be able to prepare them for this moment. The last thing that we should do as a country is to now say, just kidding, that's too far. We're not going to allow you to be able to defend yourself any longer. Them receiving aircraft from Poland or from any other country in the area is no different than them receiving Stingers from us as well.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Yes, ma'am.
So are you all willing to go on the record and say to Americans sitting at home that you're 1,000% confident that the U.S. is ready for any kind of Russian response that may come from us hand-delivering these jets? What do you think might happen, and do you think we are prepared for that, wherever that might be?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Every military action involves a risk. There's no free choices here. But James Langford is absolutely right. This is a free country who depended on us, gave up their nuclear weapons because we said we'd be there with you, and we have an obligation to stand with them now. There's risk, no question about it. I don't think the Russians want to see these MiGs because they know they'd be harmful to their effort. That's the reason they're making such noise about this.
I would go back to the Budapest Agreement of 1994 as well. We made an agreement, a written promise to the Ukrainian people, as did Russia, that we would defend them if they gave up their nuclear arsenal. They did that. We need to do absolutely everything we can to make sure that they are defending their sovereign land. And in just the half hour that we have been up here, we have lost more Ukrainians. I guarantee that. And we're not talking about their soldiers. We're talking about innocent women and children, babies, innocent men that are on the street because they don't have the capability to defend themselves as they choose to defend themselves, because we are not living up to the agreement that we signed in 1994. So if Russia would decide to come after the United States, that trips Article 5. And that means that all of NATO would be involved in pushing back against Russia. And I guarantee you, Russia does not want that. Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, the other reason that the Pentagon gave for rejecting the request is that the Ukrainians aren't using the planes that they have. They're flying very few sorties. I mean, can any of you who have been briefed speak to that situation? Will they actually use?
So Zelensky doesn't know. We know better than he does.
Yeah, see, that was the point of the call this last weekend. And when we asked the president to name the priorities for Ukraine, one was to embargo oil, to cut off that funding stream to Russia. The second was fighter jets. They need that air cover. If we're not willing to provide that no-fly zone for them, give them the means capable to defend their own airspace. And that's exactly what we should be doing. But I would also argue, too, that we have sent how many thousands of troops to Europe, to our NATO allies. We don't necessarily need them right now, do we? But they are there just in case.
Can I comment on that? Go ahead.
Yes.
No, I mean, just to talk about this specific question, the best information we have, and it may not be entirely accurate, but is that they had about 37 MiG-29s when this started. So we don't know how many they have now, because some have been shot down. And this notion that they're not flying all of them at once, of course they're not. I mean, you would want to conserve some in reserve if you didn't know what was going to happen. But if you knew you had another 29 MiGs coming in to back you up, you'd be much more likely to fly a few more sorties. That's what I'm hearing from the military experts, and it makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
If this was a problem, why was it okay for Poland to give them the jets? These guys are spouting garbage, and you know, you beat us up all the time. We probably deserve it half the time. You've got to go after this. Just look at what they're saying. They don't need more jets because they're not using the ones they've got. If we send them more jets, they may actually be more effective. This makes zero sense. And on March the 6th, 4 days ago, we green-lighted a transfer of MiGs by Poland to the Ukrainian Air Force. Nobody suggested then they don't need them, right? Now, all of a sudden, if we do what we were allowing Poland to do with our fingerprints on it, we're creating World War III. This makes zero sense, and I want to tell the American people, to your question, what if he gets away with this? What if Putin's able to go in and destroy the Ukraine, a democracy, and gets away with it, and we don't do all we can to help the Ukrainians? I'm not asking for a no-fly zone yet. I'm not asking to send ground troops. But the other side of the story is true, too. If he gets away with this, do you think he'll stop? Do you think this is all he wants? Roger made a good point yesterday. Hitler said, give me the Sudetenland, I'll stop. Well, he was lying. Putin's saying, I'm not going to stop. So to the American people, you figured this out better than the administration has. If you look at polling, the American people want to stop Putin now in the Ukraine, and they want to help the Ukrainians as much as they can.
You know, I want to put another point on the exclamation though, and that is this. Back to what the leader said at the beginning and what I'm trying to emphasize. If we'd have done more to preempt this, like more javelins, more stingers, more sanctions prior to the invasion, perhaps they wouldn't have had. Well, now we don't know for sure, but there were a lot of us saying, let's do preemptive things rather than wait for the invasion. So we're going to wait around a couple more days to decide whether or not they're using MiGs enough for us to send them some more. No, let's deter him at least where he is now, since it's too late to deter him where he was a couple weeks ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just address?
We'll let Senator
I just
Collins,
want
and
to,
then we're coming to you.
again, just like the White House, the Pentagon's position is ridiculous. It contradicts itself. They're saying, on the one hand, Ukraine is not effectively using its current aircraft and it can't effectively use this aircraft. So the gains would be very small. But on the other hand, Vladimir Putin is going to view this as such an escalation that he might strike the United States or strike NATO. Both of those things can't be true. It can't be true that we know, and therefore Russia would know, that these airplanes are not going to add decisively to the battlefield situation. But on the other hand, Vladimir Putin would view that as necessary to strike the United States or NATO. The Pentagon is making a ridiculous assertion to justify the president's halting and hesitating half measures.
Yes, ma'am.
If the Biden administration doesn't provide these other steps, will there be further action on the rest?
We will continue pressing, I can guarantee that. So we are working, of course, on the omnibus bill, and we hope to have a number of these measures in there, but the authority still lies with the President of the United States. But as has been pointed out by a number of my colleagues already, you only can't do it until you can. And we have seen that with this president time and time and time again, where he says we can't do this, we can't provide that, until the media and others provide pressure on him, and then he reverses course. So we are going to continue to put the pressure on this president to stand up, to abide by the agreement that was made in 1994, to abide by what they said that they could greenlight just a handful of days ago, and to allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves and their sovereign land. Every hour that goes by that we are not stepping up with our aid, whether it's lethal or otherwise, we have Ukrainians dying. And as I said, it's not just soldiers. They are innocent civilians that are in the path of this Russian monstrosity. And we need to provide everything we can to stop them. Yes, sir.
Earlier today, it was reported that Congressman Madison Cawthorn called Volodymyr Zelensky a thug. He said the Ukrainian government is incredibly evil, incredibly corrupt, pushing woke ideologies. And he later said that the Ukrainian government is spreading misinformation about the war. While it may seem silly to ask you what a first-term congressman thinks, he's very popular with the base.
It really is silly to ask.
No,
Now,
so do you think that, given what he's saying, that Republican voters are not in the same place as you are on this issue?
no, well, I can tell you what I think, because I spent time in Ukraine in 1989, while it was part of the former Soviet Union. And those that I visited with in Ukraine at that time, the first question, it was an agricultural exchange, and the first question that they asked of those of us from Iowa that were there on that collective farm, on that agricultural exchange, the first question they asked us was, what is it like to be an American? And what is it like to be free? They wanted to be free at that time. They were a fledgling democracy. You know, they became a free nation in 1991, and they have been fighting ever since. You know, if we think that any country is free of corruption, then we are kidding ourselves. But let me tell you what, the Ukrainians want to be free. They have been fighting for this for the past 30 years. And to just hand them over to an actual murderous thug named Vladimir Putin is the wrong thing to do. It is absolutely the wrong thing to do. So to my colleague in the House, I would push back and say, it's not Ukraine that is invading Russia. It is Russia invading Ukraine. And they are going to have they are going to have a world of hurt on their hands. But we have to be able to provide them the means to do it.
Sojourner, That probably should have been the closing statement, but I can't resist it. The Republican base is with us on this. The vast majority of Democrats are with us on this. And my colleague and good friend of more than a quarter century, Lindsey Graham, just was presumptuous enough to suggest how the press corps should do its job. I'm going to give him a little love on that. Find Bobby Menendez, the chairman, the Democratic chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and ask him how he really feels about this. I think he will tell you, if he's honest, that we should be giving those MiGs and we should be doing everything we can. Ask Jack Reed, the Democratic chairman of the Armed Services Committee, how he really feels about this, and he will tell you that he stands with us. Ask Ben Cardin, the Democratic chairman of the Helsinki Commission, the commission that represents some 50 or more countries that joined together for peace and following the rule of law in Europe. Ask him how he feels about this, and he will say we need to facilitate getting the MiGs. We stand up here on behalf of the vast majority of the American people, and we are asking the president, yes, take a little risk and take this, what could be decisive action on behalf of a free country that wants to defend itself.
This is too good. So do a poll. Ask Republicans, who do you like best, Zelensky or Putin? There's a poll coming out tonight I'm aware of where Putin's approval rating is 0.7%. Now, I don't know who these people are, but there are not a lot of them. I think the average Republican and Democrat in this country would give high marks to Zelensky. Do a poll. I've seen these polls. What Putin has done something we can't do among ourselves. Like 90% of the country is with the Ukrainians and is opposed to Putin. So when you see a member of Congress say things like this, the one thing I want you to know, they're outliers in the largest sense possible on our side. And there's some on the left that are outliers. So let's end with this thought, that America believes that Zelensky and the Ukrainians are the good guys and Putin's the bad guys, and we'd like to be helping the good guys more.
Yeah, we're going to close. We're going to close, but we do have a copy of the letter that has been signed by most of our Republican conference, so we'll go ahead and hand those out to you if you would like a copy. But we all thank you very much for coming today.